Right, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We're going to start off this evening's session, I should say, is about qualitative data collection and analysis. And I'm going to start off by showing you a video. And the context of the video is it was filmed in December 2012. And it was filmed immediately after the ANC's National Congress, at which Cyril Ramaphosa was elected the Deputy President of the ANC. So it's an interview with Jeremy Maggs of ENCA, and the idea of it is that you simply view it and look at just absorb the content of it, because we're then going to talk about qualitative data collection techniques, and then I'm going to show you the video again later, all right, after we've discussed the different techniques, so that you can then analyze it. So we're going to be using this video as qualitative data, as a qualitative data collection tool. So that I want you to view it for now, just so that you're not focusing on the content when you then wanting to do the analysis. Okay.
Cyril Ramaphosa, a very warm welcome to ENCA and the heartiest congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you very much.
You certainly have kept the country waiting until the 11th hour. One senses maybe that you might have been reluctant to take the job.
Yes, this appointment or election is something that I did not go seeking out. I was minding my own business. It's not something that I willingly stepped into. And I had to reflect on it quite a lot. And I had to do some soul searching, also talk to my family, and do a lot of consultation with a number of people. And in a way, I had to get out of my comfort zone, because being in business meant that I was in a comfort zone in terms of, doing political work. I was a part-time politician, which I thought was sufficient. But now this is full-time. So having done all that, I also needed to consider the call from the members of the ANC and the branches. And in the ANC, you respond to calls that the people make. You're essentially a servant. And when they call, you cannot say no.
You've effectively waited 20 years for a job in frontline politics. There was one newspaper headline earlier today that referred to you as the chosen one, your time has come. Is that how you see it?
No, that's not how I see it. I've always been on the National Executive Committee. I've always been involved in the political formations of the ANC, serving in various committees.
Very much behind the scenes.
Yes, very much behind the scenes, and in some instances being on serious committees like finance and the disciplinary committee. So I have been there, but they decided that they would like to kick me to another position.
But you have exercised long-term political patience. We don't have time to go into the history of 20 years ago, but is there a sense of vindication now that you have this job, and possibly at some point your eye on the top job?
No, it isn't a vindication in the sense that you're vindicated if you thought that something had gone wrong, or people thought that something had gone wrong. It was being deployed in a particular role and working there and continuing there until people decided otherwise. And being put here is the will of the people, and there is no other job that I have my eyes on. I've been elected.
That old line about the best president South Africa never had?
Oh no, I mean that is completely nonsense. In the ANC, we serve in the positions that we are deployed in, and I've been deployed in this position, and I intend to do the best that I can. I'll give it my all.
Quite bluntly put then, what do you bring to the party, and more importantly, what do you bring to the government?
I'm not in government, and I'm not about to go into government.
Well, we can talk about that in a moment.
I am in the ANC. What I bring is the experiences that we all have as members of the ANC, our inherent ability to do certain things, the endowments that we have as individuals, like being able to play in a leadership role, and the experiences that the ANC has put us through. I've been fortunate. The ANC has put me through a lot of experiences, writing the constitution, participating with others, my trade union work, and now I've been in business for a couple of years, and that has exposed me to other processes, and I guess a combination of all that and being able to work with other people helps a lot.
Some are talking about a salvation role. There's commentary that says that your President Zuma's get out of jail free card, that in time you will bring legitimacy to an administration that is mired in controversy.
No, not at all. I mean, in this role, I am President Zuma's assistant. I am there to support what he does in the ANC, and clearly because the ANC is the party that's in government, what we do in the party has an impact on what happens in government. So in that sense, yes, what I will be doing and what the Secretary General will be doing will have an impact. So people need to see us as a collective.
Let me come at it from a different way then. How much support right now do you believe a beleaguered President Zuma might need? Certainly beleaguered in public perception.
Well, I don't see President Zuma as being beleaguered. I see him as a very strong president, a president who has led from the front. What has he done that is most outstanding and prominent in my mind is delivering to the nation the National Development Plan. We've had President Mandela, who delivered us to freedom, President Mbeki stabilized, and President Zuma has actually delivered a blueprint for the future, a blueprint to 2030. Now, that is the leadership that he has shown leading from the front.
Which ambitiously says that unemployment will be reduced to zero by 2030. It's a highly ambitious plan. Do you really believe that the Zuma administration has the capacity and the wherewithal to deliver on that?
Yes.
And you will play a key role in that?
The blueprint, which is the National Development Plan, seen in combination with the new growth path, the infrastructure plan that we have, and the industrial plan that we have, all those instruments within the framework of what has been set out by the vision that the National Development Plan sets out.
You find that interesting, reflecting on what's happened over the last 5 years to where we are now? I thought it was quite revealing when I looked at it myself. Right, so we're going to be looking at qualitative data collection and analysis. So, first of all, just sort of tying in with what we've been speaking about previously, we spoke a couple of sessions ago about how when you're collecting data, you are wanting to get inside people's heads, you're wanting to actually get past the inevitable filtering that will happen as people respond to questions, be it in an interview situation or in some sort of a survey. So my question to you is, to what extent do you think that the interviewer, in this case Jeremy Maggs, got inside Cyril's head and got real answers? What's your thoughts? What's your sense of that? Did we get real answers from Cyril in that interview? Say again?
He's a politician.
He's a politician. Yeah. All right. So, do you think that when you interview somebody that you're going to be getting inside their heads? No. You're not? All right. Now we're going to kind of be exploring some of the issues about the data collection, but I just want you to reflect on the reality that just by doing a qualitative interview doesn't suddenly mean that you're going to get easy access to information and easy access to data. Jeremy Maggs, I think, is a really experienced journalist, and certainly more experienced at interviewing people than probably everybody in the room. But the reality is that I think you probably would agree that we didn't really see the real Cyril in that interview. All right. So issues of reliability, and the word that's often used in qualitative research and qualitative data collection is sincerity of the data. Were the answers sincere? And I think that we need to understand that you say as a politician, well, that's fine, but does that mean that you don't have good data to work with? And quite possibly you don't. So just by show of hands, how many of you are thinking of doing qualitative data collection and analysis for your projects? Just show of hands. Right. Can I ask you why you're choosing qualitative? Be honest. Why are you choosing qualitative? Yeah. Qualitative is easier. Quantitative is easier. Which is easier, numbers or qualitative?
No, qualitative. The reading is easier.
The reading is easier.
Then to do the things you were showing us last time. The numbers and the graphs and the things that talk.
Okay, well, let's see how this evening pans out and how easy you find. I'm just responding to your question. All right. Other people. Yeah.
I think it's probably more relevant to a specific topic. The stats you're not going to draw or infer enough information from the stats where you might from.
Be more specific. What circumstances do you think so? You put up your hand, didn't you?
Yeah, but I'm still quite vague.
Okay. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I'm just trying to think in terms of speaking to an expert in a certain field or exactly that, trying to get more in their head, so more the rationale and more the reasoning and meaning as opposed to the number. It may be better in certain instances, so it would be an expertise and an area or a manager.
Okay. I'm comfortable with that answer in the sense that in certain circumstances, qualitative may be more appropriate. Other people that are choosing qualitative, why? I really would be very interested to know what the rationale for your choice is. Yeah.
I think to try and get a deeper understanding of something. So maybe there was something quantitative that was done, but to understand why were those the results, what led to those results in particular.
Right. Okay.
That's in my situation.
Okay. How many of you doing qualitative because it's not quantitative? Be honest. Okay. No, that's fine. Thank you for that honesty. All right, but let me be blunt with you. All right. It's the worst reason possible to do qualitative. Okay. All right. So it's the worst possible reason. So the reason that you make a choice between qualitative and quantitative should be based exactly as you're saying on what you're trying to get out of the data. Right? That's the reason that we would follow a different approach. It's not about the fact that you didn't understand how a factor analysis works. You see.
I can pass.
Say again?
I'll pass this easier than the other stuff.
You find the qualitative easier?
No, I find numbers too.
Numbers?
For me, no. It's horrid.
Horrid.
I don't know how I even pass half the things I pass. Numbers.
Okay, well, as I say, let's have a look and see. Let's talk about it through the evening. So, let's just first of all.
No, thank you.
Let's first of all just sort of recap on the data collection process, right, where it fits into your project. So you start off, the first section of your project is going to be contextualizing. So it's either your research problem or it's the scoping statement for your business venture or your consulting report, as the case may be. So your review of the theory, when you investigate the theory that is applicable to and within the scope of your project, right? That scoping statement directs you. It delimits what you do. It says what's relevant and what's not relevant. That's what it's supposed to do, right? So your literature review is directly focused around the problem, and the literature and the theory is applicable to your project. And as you go through the literature, the idea is that the theory will, at least in part, resolve some of the issues and clarify the scope and resolve some of the problems that you're facing. So whether it be a consultancy report where theory shows how a problem might be addressed, whether it's in research, which gives you a platform on which to investigate further, whatever the case may be. So the literature is relevant to the scope of your project, but it doesn't resolve it in its entirety. So you're going to have to go and collect data of one sort or another that fills in the gaps. And the theory base, the literature, is going to guide you in that. So whatever's left after you've done your review of literature and your review of theory, that's what you need to go and collect data for. And that's defined by propositions or hypotheses or research questions, typically. All right. So you get to the end of of the literature, and there are these unanswered issues, and you need to go and collect data to then go and resolve those unanswered issues or unresolved issues. So the idea is that your data collection fills in those gaps. So it fills in what the theory hasn't filled in order for you to resolve the research problem, or to make the recommendations for the consulting report, or to build your business case in the case of a business venture or social entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Is it possible to use both methods?
Is it possible to
use both methods?
So what methods? I didn't check.
Qualitative and quantitative?
Both methods. Oh, sorry. Yes, absolutely. But we don't recommend it, all right? Because it's a very different approach, and it effectively doubles up the amount of work that you're needing to do. And the danger is that you will use what I refer to as a muddled methodology, so where you mix up the two, because quantitative and qualitative give you fundamentally different outcomes, and we'll talk about that. Quantitative is general. We aim it to be generalizable because we take a sample that is out of a population and we aim to be able to generalize that to a population. Whereas qualitative, as we see, is about richness and depth of understanding. So usually they're quite fundamentally different in what you're trying to achieve. So can you do both? Yes, mixed methods is a well-known approach, but be very cautious about that and make sure that you're not going way beyond the scope of what would be expected of an MBA project. So that would be my response there. Okay. So the idea is when you choose your method of data collection and analysis, you do so with a view to the gaps that you're needing to resolve. So is it something where you're going to need to generalize your results, in which case typically you're going to be following a qualitative methodology? If it's something where you need that richness and specificity of information, the uniqueness that can't be generalized typically, then you may well be in the realm of qualitative. But it does depend on what the scope of your problem is and what the research problem is and what the literature has told you. You see, so it's not something that you should be doing out of pure personal preference, all right? That you don't like numbers. That's why I say it's probably the worst reason to choose qualitative research, because it might be completely inappropriate for the particular problem that you're trying to address or the context of your project. Okay. So how do we gather data? Where do we get the data from? What will form our intention to follow a qualitative approach? Well, what we're going to be doing with qualitative data collection and analysis is to understand what the content of that is. Understand the themes that are embedded within that. So it's going to be analyzing interviews such as this. It's going to be maybe analyzing your own interviews. It's analyzing the narrative of a particular situation. And it might even involve imagery. It might involve analyzing a conversation such as we've just looked at. So if we were looking at the kind of political and economic environment in South Africa at the moment, one might be very interested to have a look at the transition over the past 5 years. And that might form very, very important data for you, setting the scene for where we were at the end of 2012. and looking at what the transition has been through these 5 years. So that's very typical of the sort of qualitative data that we might be looking at. One of the reasons why we might be doing qualitative data collection as well is in order to triangulate. Now, triangulate, I think I might have mentioned it when we were talking about reliability and validity, is when you gather information from different sources in order to verify the data or in order to check how reliable that data is. So that might be a reason for your choosing to go a qualitative method. You're also looking at comparing and contrasting situations, so where numbers maybe won't tell you what the differences are or the similarities are. So again, I think that was, you kind of mentioned that when you answered the question earlier. But the most important thing to remember is that you're not aiming to generalize your results with qualitative research. So you can't and you shouldn't be thinking about applying the results of your qualitative analysis to a population. That's just not the way it works. That's not qualitative research. What you're looking for is the richness and the insights, the uniqueness, what's sometimes referred to as a thick description. It's almost like syrupy. You get right into it. You get stuck into it. Okay? And it's the in-depth descriptions and interpretations of a given situation. And it's context specific and it's researcher specific, that we'll find as well. So when we do the analysis of that video clip, you will come up with different interpretations. You will come up with different themes, none of which are necessarily right or wrong. Okay, so it depends on your particular perspective as well. So this thing, multiple meanings within a specific context or within different contexts. All right. So that's what qualitative research is aimed at. And if that's what your project requires, then it is entirely appropriate to go for a qualitative methodology. If your project requires more generalization of results, then you're probably not in that game. So be careful of that. So how would one do the analysis of qualitative data? Well, typically you're going to have something, a transcript of something. You might have a transcript of a video clip or a transcript of an interview. And the idea is that you go through that in detail and you look at coding the content of it. So what I mean by that is that you literally go through it kind of sentence by sentence of an interview transcript or a video transcript, and you capture the essence of it. So what are the words that are used? What is the meaning? What's the interpretation maybe of that? And to do that, there are various techniques you can use. You can use sticky notes. You can use colored highlighters. You find your own way of doing it. You can cut and paste into tables if you want to. But the idea is to find the essence of that. Now, bear in mind that you might have, from a 1-hour interview, you might have 30 or 40 pages of text. All right? That's going to be a time-consuming process. If you've got a dozen interviews that you've carried out, multiply that 30-odd pages by 12, and you get a lot of data. Right? So you've got enormous amount of data within that. But beware, you've got to analyze it all. And analyzing qualitative data is not just about reading it and getting a sense of it. When we spoke about what analysis is in an earlier session, you remember, it was about decomposing that into its component parts and then looking at the relationships between those parts. So you have to go through meticulously, and it's a very structured approach in order to pull out the meaning from that qualitative data.
Sorry.
Yep.
When someone is assessing your research and you've conducted qualitative research, will they go into that kind of nuance when assessing what you've put in your actual report reflects the data?
When you say the nuance, what do you mean by that?
So
will they
go
look
through how you coded it, page by page or whatever, or they just look at the report itself?
Well, I think in the same way, there are a lot of parallels between qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis, by the way. So they're not going to necessarily, in looking at using quantitative as a proxy for now, they're not going to go through each step of your regression analysis, but they're going to make sure that the regression analysis makes sense. They're going to see that you've done one and what the outcomes are. Now, when you're analyzing qualitatively, you've got to also show that you have gone through the structured process of analyzing and not just sort of come up with some ideas out of these interviews.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm asking.
No, that's what I'm saying. It needs to be evident.
Yeah.
There needs to be evidence of analysis.
Because qualitative is pretty much subjective to the researcher to a certain degree. So my understanding of what someone said and your understanding of what someone said is totally different.
That's what I'm saying. It's not about right or wrong answers. Remember when we talked about factor analysis, we also said that the number of factors and the naming of factors is also quite subjective. Right? But it has to be evident how you came up with those. So you can't just say, well, this is an idea that came out of these 12 or 15 interviews. You actually have to be able to show how you got there. Right? And that might be difficult. Right? You might have to, or it might be advisable, I should say, to include what was your coding structure that you used to demonstrate that you did actually use one, rather than just sort of say, oh, that looks interesting, I'm going to write about that. Unfortunately, an enormous amount of qualitative research is done very, very poorly and involves people just interviewing people and then kind of writing stuff up that they found interesting. That's not analysis. And that's what I'm saying to you, is that you need to follow a structured analytical approach, even though it's qualitative and even though it's subjective. Okay. So your process of analysis has to be evident. It has to be evident what you've done in order to get to your results. Otherwise, the whole thing has no validity. Otherwise, it's just your opinion again. You've got that? Or you look very uncomfortable with that answer.
No.
No, you do look uncomfortable.
No, I do look uncomfortable. I have to.
Oh, you look like that normally.
I do. Okay.
You must get more comfortable shirts.
He was getting too much money.
All right. So once you've coded all of this, you're then going to look for kind of where are the categories. How can you group those? A little bit like I was doing when I did factor analysis, where I took a survey with the questions and we grouped those into different factors. In that case, it was done mathematically. But what I'm saying is you've got to do it, the same type of thing. You've got to do that on the basis of the semantics, of the words, of the meaning that is communicated, the metaphors that are used, the synonyms that are used. Right, so you're going to have to go through that process. And ultimately, you take those categories and you then group them into themes. And what we're looking for there is not just that, well, that was discussed and that was discussed and that was discussed. What we're looking for is what were the themes that came out of the different aspects and discussion at different parts of the interview or the document. That's what a thematic analysis is. It's not just saying, well, we spoke about that, we spoke about that. That's a pure narrative. Now, there's a role to play for narrative. I'm not saying that a narrative is not valuable. In fact, a narrative can be an extremely valuable tool. But it needs to be evident how that narrative emerged, if that's going to be your approach. So, typically, we're going to look for those themes. And in the same way, again, as we would use with quantitative analysis, we would quote certain key statistics or key data. The same thing applies with qualitative, where you're going to use maybe key verbatim extracts from your interviews or from your documentation or from the video to illustrate the points that you're making, to illustrate the analysis. That doesn't mean to say what you do is you say, well, there's my theme, and then you present 3 pages of verbatim extracts. And again, that's something that I've seen quite typically, is that people put in these verbatim extracts page after page of them and expect the reader to interpret the underlying themes and the thematic content of them. Again, that's not analysis. That's just simply rearranging the data. So the analysis has to be evident. So this is sort of diagrammatically what we're saying. So if you've got a transcript, you first of all are going to start off by picking out the key issues, the key sentences, the key the key narrative may be within that transcript. You encode it, all right, and there might be hundreds of codes depending on the subject matter, depending on the length of the interviews, the complexity of the topic. You then categorize those in different ways, and ultimately you reduce that down to a manageable number of themes that you can then write about and interpret and apply. So there's a very clear structure to what I'm suggesting you need to do here. Very clear structure. Okay. So here's just a few ideas. And I referred to sort of metaphors and synonyms and so on. So you're going to group these concepts, and just those examples. These examples come from Terry Carmichael. She's lent me these slides for you. So things like personal growth, own development, gaining maturity, they all mean very, very similar things. And so one would group those thematically. So they're different words. Now notice that you're going to have to do that interpretation. Adding colors and symbols, that sort of thing, using cut and paste, those are all tools that you can use. And then again, looking for the patterns. I mean, it's in some ways quite ironic that what we're doing in quantitative is also looking for patterns in the data, because that's how you then find the relationships and the between the various items. In quants, we have correlation to measure the association between variables. In qualitative, there's a lot of other ways in which one can pick up associations. And this table here gives us some examples of relationships between concepts, between sort of elements of a conversation or that might come up in discussion. So it's there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. So you can see these are all, in this case, the X's and the Y's are all related to one another, but it's not as simple as saying, well, there's a correlation of 0.8 and that's statistically significant, because each relationship has a different meaning. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show the video again, but now I want you to analyze the data. All right, so I want you to analyze it basically in three ways. The first is I want you to identify the underlying themes. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to actually capture some of the key words, the key phrases, the key sentences as we go through the video. So you'll need to code those. You need to categorize them, and I'll give you 15-20 minutes or so after the video to do this work. But you need to capture it as it goes through. So capture the codes, develop the themes. So I want to understand from you what are the themes that come through in this interview. And remember, it's not about he said that, he said that, he said that. It's about what are the consistent themes that come through throughout the whole discussion. That's what I mean by the thematic analysis. Then what I want you to do is I want you to look for these sorts of relationships. Where are connections made in the interview between the themes and other themes, or between codes or categories and other codes or categories? So looking for the explicit relationships and connections of concepts that get made. And the third thing I want you to do is write a brief narrative. And what I mean by that is a story. And when I say brief, I'm talking about 30, maybe 40 words about how this interview fits into the narrative of what's evolved in South Africa over the last 5 years. Right? Because clearly what is being said there would not be said in an interview today. I think it's fairly obvious given the political dynamics, that things have changed. Not everything. I'm not saying everything will have changed, but I want to hear the narrative, the story that you can tell in kind of 30 to 40 words of that transition from 2012, December 2012, when this was filmed, through to the present day. All right. So listen to it critically. As I said, that was said up front. Why I showed it to you initially was so that you could get the basic content of the interview. Now, I want you to take this data and I want you to analyze it. Clear on what I'm looking for? Questions? All good?
So Ramaphosa, a very warm welcome to ENCA and the heartiest congratulations on the appointment.
Thank you very much.
You certainly have kept the country waiting until the 11th hour. One senses maybe that you might have been reluctant to take the job.
Yes, this appointment or election is something that I did not go seeking out. I was minding my own business. It's not something that I willingly stepped into. And I had to reflect on it quite a lot. And I had to do some soul searching, also talk to my family, and do a lot of consultation with a number of people. And in a way, I had to get out of my comfort zone, because being in business meant that I was in a comfort zone in terms of, doing political work. I was a part-time politician, which I thought was sufficient. But now this is full-time. So having done all that, I also needed to consider the call from the members of the ANC and the branches. And in the ANC, you respond to calls that the people make. You're essentially a servant. And when they call, you cannot say no.
You've effectively waited 20 years for a job in frontline politics. There was one newspaper headline earlier today that referred to you as the chosen one, your time has come. Is that how you see it?
No, that's not how I see it. I've always been on the National Executive Committee. I've always been involved in the political formations of the ANC, serving in various committees.
But very much behind the scenes.
Yes, very much behind the scenes, and in some instances being on serious committees like finance and the disciplinary committee. So I have been there, but they decided that they'd like to kick me to another position.
But you have exercised long-term political patience. We don't have time to go into the history of 20 years ago, but is there a sense of vindication now that you have this job and possibly at some point your eye on the top job?
No, it isn't a vindication in the sense that you're vindicated if you thought that something had gone wrong, or people thought that something had gone wrong. It was being deployed in a particular role and working there and continuing there until people decided otherwise. And being put here is the will of the people, and there is no other job that I have my eyes on. I've been elected.
That old line about the best president South Africa never had?
Oh no, I mean that is completely nonsense. In the ANC, we serve in the positions that we are deployed in, and I've been deployed in this position, and I intend to do the best that I can. I'll give it my all.
Quite bluntly put then, what do you bring to the party, and more importantly, what do you bring to the government?
I'm not in government, and I'm not about to go into government.
Well, we can talk about that in a moment.
I am in the ANC. What I bring is the experiences that we all have as members of the ANC, our inherent ability to do certain things, the endowments that we have as individuals, like being able to play in a leadership role, and the experiences that the ANC has put us through. I've been fortunate. The ANC has put me through a lot of experiences, you know, writing the constitution, participating with others, my trade union work, and now I've been in business for a couple of years, and that has exposed me to other processes. And I guess a combination of all that and being able to work with other people helps a lot.
Some are talking about a salvation role. There's commentary that says that your President Zuma's get out of jail free card, that in time you will bring legitimacy to an administration that is mired in controversy.
No, not at all. I mean, in this role, I am President Zuma's assistant. I am there to support what he does in the ANC, and clearly because the ANC is the party that's in government, what we do in the party has an impact on what happens in government. So in that sense, yes, what I will be doing and what the Secretary General will be doing will have an impact. So people need to see us as a collective.
Let me come at it from a different way then. How much support right now do you believe a beleaguered President Zuma might need? Certainly beleaguered in public perception.
Well, I don't see President Zuma as being beleaguered. I see him as a very strong president, a president who has led from the front. What has he done that is most outstanding and prominent in my mind is delivering to the nation the National Development Plan. We've had President Mandela, who delivered us to freedom, President Mbeki stabilized, and President Zuma has actually delivered a blueprint for the future, a blueprint to 2030. Now, that is the leadership that he has shown leading from the front.
Which ambitiously says that unemployment will be reduced to zero by 2030. It's a highly ambitious plan. Do you really believe that the Zuma administration has the capacity and the wherewithal to deliver on that?
Yes.
And you will play a key role in that?
The blueprint, which is the National Development Plan, seen in combination with the New Growth Path, the infrastructure plan that we have, and the industrial plan that we have, all those instruments within the framework of what has been set out by the vision that the National Development Plan sets out.
You're good at negotiation. Are you going to call Rolf Meyer, by the way?
He's a good mate of mine, and wherever he can help, Rolf Meyer is always prepared.
Should he put his cell phone on?
He should put his cell phone on, indeed.
We're in conversation with Cyril Ramaphosa here on ENCA. We'll have more for you.
Right, so Nick, just for about 20 minutes or so, I want you to unpack that, to do the analysis in the way I suggested. Okay. So I'll leave you to it. Are there any questions at this stage? Do you understand what's necessary? Okay. The Applied Research Project is an individual project. It's not a syndicate project. I want you to do it on your own.